Good evening, everyone. My name is Thandazani Dlakama, and I'm a curator at the Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa, Zeitz MOCAA. Welcome to our 8th When We See Us webinar. Tonight's webinar is titled Fabulation and Figuration, Navigating the Tension Between Image and Imaginaries. Conceived by Zeitz MOCAA in collaboration with the Institute of Humanities in Africa, UMA, at the University of Cape Town, UCT, the When We See Us webinar series is part of a larger project that comprises a major exhibition of the same name, as well as an extensive publication. When We See Us, a Century of Black Figuration in Painting, attempts to unveil the deeper historic context and networks of a complex and underrepresented genealogy that stems from Africa and the Black modernities and spans several generations from the early 20th century to the present. Our esteemed presenters for today are all artists whose works are included in the When We See Us, a Century of Black Figuration in Painting exhibition. They include Cassi Namoda, Edouard Duval-Carrié, and Michael Armitage. I'm just going to read their brief bios before they come online. Cassi Namoda, born 1988, is a painter whose work transfigures the cultural mythologies and historical narratives of life in post-colonial Africa, particularly those of the artist's native Mozambique. Namoda's paintings are highly elusive, drawing upon literary, cinematic, and architectural influences that capture the expansiveness of a specifically Luso-African vantage point. The idiosyncratic subjects who appear and reappear in Namoda's paintings also convey this hybridity. They emerge from African indigenous religions just as much as they spring from Western mythologies. Her work borrows from an art historical canon and arises from vernacular photography in equal measure. While they appear straightforward, her images are conceptually rigorous and portray figures with complex narratives. Namoda is equally attentive to landscape, creating scenes that depict both the rural and the urban through a surreal lens. Having lived in Haiti, the United States, Kenya, Benin, Uganda, and other countries, Namoda has acquired a grasp of place that is at once grounded and subversive. Her landscapes resound with features of equatorial life, blazing suns, palm trees, but they are mythic in representation and pleasantly impeccable, mirroring the subjects that populate them. Edouard Duval-Carrié, born in 1954, is a multidisciplinary artist and curator from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, who is based in Miami in Florida, United States. Born and raised in Haiti, Duval-Carrié fled the regime of Papa Doc Duvalier as a teenager and subsequently resided in locales as diverse as Puerto Rico, New York, Montreal, Paris, and Miami. His works that speak to the complexities of the Caribbean and its diaspora have been exhibited in major museums, art institutions, galleries in Africa, Europe, and the Americas. These include several of his recent solo exhibitions, such as The Art of Embedded Histories, 2019, Decolonizing Refinement, 2018 to 2019, and Memories Ancestrais, Memory Windows, 2018. As an alternative form of historical chronicling, Duval-Carrié's work critically explores social and historical aspects of Haitian politics and culture. His rich symbolic language draws heavily on magical realism, or the marvelous real, and often includes voodoo gods or the Loas and their related iconographies, combined with aspects of classical mythology, historical narratives surrounding Haitian national heroes like Toussaint Louverture and the like. In 2018, Duval-Carrié was the inaugural recipient of the Ellis Michael Richards Award, which is given to a Miami-based artist who has cultivated and original practice over a long period of time. Most recently, his works were shown at the 15th edition of Documenta, a prestigious international exhibition held in Kassel, Germany. Our third speaker, Michael Armitage, born in 1984, was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and lives and works between London, England, and Nairobi. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Fine Art from the Slade School of Fine Art of the University College London in London, 2007, and as a postgraduate diploma from the Royal Academy Schools, London, 2010. In 2022, the Royal Academy of Arts London elected him as a Royal Academician in the category of painting. Armitage is the founder of the Nairobi Contemporary Art Institute, a non-profit visual art space dedicated to the growth and preservation of contemporary art in East Africa. Armitage paints with oil on lubugo, a traditional bark cloth from Uganda, which is beaten over a period of days, creating a natural material when stretched out, has occasional holes and coarse indents. As noted by the artist, the use of lubugo is at once an attempt to locate and destabilize the subject of his paintings. Solo exhibitions include, I'm just going to name a few because it's quite extensive. The Kunsthaus Bregenz, Austria, 2023, White Cube, Bermondense, London, 2022. Selected group exhibitions include the Astrup Fernland Museum of Modern Art in Oslo, 2023, Tate Modern, London, 2023, National Museum of Art in North Carolina, 2018, Prospect 4, New Orleans, 2017, the 13th Biennial of Lyon, France, 2015, Palazzo Capri in Turin, Italy, 2015, South London Gallery, 2014, the Drawing Room, London, 2023. And I must say, all three of our speakers today have exhibited widely and are in key collections all around the world. Now to dive into the conversation. So as mentioned before, our topic is fabulation and figuration, navigating the tension between image and imaginaries. And so I just want to ask Edouard, Cassi, and Michael, what comes to mind when you think of fabulation and figuration? And we can start off with Edouard.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Indeed, fabulation, we do not have an extensive historical and visual historical documentation. So it's for us most, I mean, for artists to really try to review this and try to understand it and present it so that it's the whole context of what happened, especially in this middle passage and as they call it today, of the transatlantic trade, slave trade. And for example, the work that I have with you at the Zeitz MOCAA tries to tries to elucidate one particular aspect of it. And in Haiti, we have in our lores and in our probably our like very complex Vodou religion, a series of reenactments that are brought to mind concerning this particular story. And in this particular work that you have there, it's like this group of individuals or deities or whatever you want to call them, mysteries, which stem from very, very tragic and very violent moments in the slave trade, which were, I mean, as they say, as I read it somewhere, I don't even remember where, to lighten boats that were caught in bad weather, transporting slaves and others across the Atlantic. To lighten the weight of the boat, they would just simply throw the slave because they were considered as ballast. And I've never really saw any such depictions of that. And I've tried to presented it somehow in a very religious type of format. And I've taken the Pechwise from India and tried to reconstruct that particular image as a point of focus for religious purposes, I guess. Anyways, all they are, they've turned into what they call ambaglos. And ambaglos simply means people living underwater. And this this particular work, it's interspersed with all types of images from the slavery compendium of images that exist today, as we can find it, like in the slavery archives and et cetera, et cetera. So I've chosen some of them and put them in. But basically, in the voodoo ceremonies and stuff like that, they recall them sometimes, and they call upon them to remember those moments, like of the slave trade. So I mean, this is my way of paying homage to that. I can go, in my work, this is trying to understand the Haitian saga has been very complicated. In Haiti, we start our history with our glorious revolution, but the 300 years prior to that have been literally erased from history. Literally, from the discovery by Columbus to to the Haitian Revolution. It's probably the first chapter which condenses 300 years of history, and it's been something that I found very profoundly disturbing, and I've tried to illustrate that part as well. Let's see. The whole idea of I really encountered this 300 years through just one novel, the one given to us by Alejo Carpentier, the Kingdom of This World, which he tries to make that whole history, that whole 300 years of French presence in the Caribbean, in Haiti, and he just goes through it, in a very fantastical way, and probably it's the first novel that could be described as magical realism, because it's simply a presentation of the whole society and the whole of what was happening in Haiti. As a sugar producing plantation style, which probably the whole of the Americas was at the time, was presented in such a way that it really does create, it almost sounds like a fabulous story, in which I've taken in this group of work that I've presented a few years back at the local Perez Museum. What I really wanted to show was this idea that the tropics and the complete, there was a period in the American politics where, the Americas presented by, what was the name? President Monroe, where America was, for Americans. What did that really mean? And he proposed that, all the countries in the Americas should free themselves from the tutelage of their European, for the European metropoles. So he, when they asked him, what was his plans, were they going to consume all the coffees from Haiti, the sugar from Cuba, the this from the South America? It was a very he felt rebuked, and in the process, a host of artists went down and tried to recreate the Americas as a place of investment, et cetera, et cetera. And it was very interesting, because what they brought back was literally a reenactment of what the Spaniards did, a few centuries prior to that, where they presented, one of the largest cities in the world at the time, Tenochtitlan, Mexico City today, as an empty space for Europeans to invest in, Spaniards to invest in. Anyways, I've been trying to grapple this whole 300 years and present it today in a way that makes sense. And I don't know if I've succeeded or not, but it's one the history of the New World has to be rewritten literally and probably reinterpreted by I mean within like parameters that have yet to be established. Anyways, for example, in this group, I mean, that I presented in Castle, I mean, it was a simple question. It was an exhibit that's supposed to happen somewhere in South Africa, probably in Johannesburg. I mean, I was offered the museum there to present literally the first Black Republic to the latest Black Republic, which South Africa is, from my understanding. And I wanted to show the complexities of Haiti as the first Black Western Republic. And it's the first time we see in the visual history, Blacks dressed up as, like in European garbs with the trappings of power. I mean, i.e. military uniforms, etc., all the gild, the glitter that went with it. And I presented it in a format that was probably technically I mean, suited to the time that they existed, i.e. engravings, etc. Even though photography was in what do you call it, in its infancy. Anyways, I'm not going to go talk about all. I mean, I think I've talked enough here. I don't see what much time I've been involved with, but I'll let my colleagues and we'll continue this discussion. Is that okay, Tandazani?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. There are obviously a lot of things I want to unpack that you said later on as we continue with the conversation. But for now, let's hand over to Cassie, your initial reactions to the topic of fabulation and figuration.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, Edouard.
Thank you.
So I wrote a little piece on fabulation in context to my presentation. So fabulation in the context of painting, I would persuade is an experiential sensation to having no real memory of factual or actual encounters, but to believe in the mythology of the spiritual metaphysical realm. In this case, I would think it to exist in the art canon. Ideas that evoke pleasure and pain in the medium of pigment. Painting is, to simply put it, an exploration and expression of the human experience. I have selected a composition of events that are images and paintings pertaining to my practice, in which I hope to create a sense of evocation, a spiritual fabulation of Black consciousness. And this is an entry piece to a Mozambican author, Mia Couto, on memory, which reads, "What I yearn for," oh, sorry, went too fast. Could we just go back? I'll read that. "In what I yearn for, I never spoke about. I only yearn for what I never recall. What is the use of memory if what I lived most intensely is what never happened?" And I'll just let the images roll. Like the whole idea is to evoke some sort of, I usually present paintings, but I felt that this was a really important moment to show some of my my love for archival images. So I hope everyone had some sort of sensation from those images. And pertaining to my practice, when I think of fabulation in the sort of spiritual realm, if I'm talking about Zeitz MOCAA and the way they brilliantly curated the exhibition, me and my colleagues are in the spiritual room. Is that right, Tandanzani? Is that what you? Yeah, and I feel with my work, I look a lot at the macabre, I look at familial scenes, I look at post-colonial histories, and Western mythologies and African theology, and there's so many ideas that dovetail to create these stories, and I felt that it would be really special to sort of dovetail the found images, my love for images, and painting. So I hope everyone enjoyed that, and I will let Michael take the floor.
Thank you so much for that, Cassie. We definitely did feel something as you were presenting your images. And yeah, it just so happens that everyone on this panel, all of your work is in the spirituality section of the exhibition. And I would love to unpack that more a little bit later on. Thank you for sharing. Michael, I'm going to hand over to you now, so you can talk to us about your initial thoughts around the idea of fabulation and figuration.
Amazing, thanks. I'm just going to try and share screen and hopefully, along with that, share part of a PowerPoint. Hopefully this works. Slideshow. Hopefully this does that work? Is that okay with everyone? But great. Hopefully you can all see the image. But yeah, thank you so much for having me be part of this conversation. And it's amazing to see a little bit of your work, Cassie and Edouard. And yeah, look forward to this conversation as well. In all honesty, I found the kind of premise of the talk problematic, and I found it quite difficult to then position within a painting context. I can understand it much more in terms of literature, but within a painting context, place my work within this conversation around fabulation. But I thought the other proposal about a tension between the image and imaginaries, or maybe even there's something in it about an idea of some sort of truth to almost like reportage, and the expectation of that with work that looks historically to be maybe an interesting approach to this. And from that regard, I'm really excited to be talking to both the other artists as well in this. And again, I thought it was super interesting how with Cassie's, you could see where sometimes the narrative feels totally unimportant, and the image and then how that's then consumed and then painted and taken forward becomes something different, much more open, and invites a lot more different conversations and ideas. And that really is where I'd love to speak a little bit. My screen seems to have decided to disappear, so I'll try that again.
Michael, would you go back again into your thing? I think I know what you're possibly doing wrong. So
okay, cool. I'll try again. Let's see how this goes.
Just because I was learning this last night. Okay.
Yeah,
so when you go to slideshow, can you click the little arrow next to it? Could you?
Is that the one?
No, you went too fast.
Whoops, sorry. It might go again. I'll be quick, and then we can all chat properly.
Exit the screen. Exit the screen.
Exit the screen.
Okay, go. Yeah, there's that bit right there. Yes, and then start from beginning.
Okay, great. So I just thought, again, thinking about the exhibition, that I would show a couple of the paintings that were made around the same time, around the same event.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Michael. We can't see it, but what if you just show us as the little screen without clicking the slideshow, because we can see it when you open it up.
Okay,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
see what happens.
So just don't make it full slideshow. And apologies to our viewers.
How's that? Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
perfect.
The
Yeah.
point comes across.
Yes.
Great. So, so the painting that's part of the show is called the Dumb Oracle, and it was part of a series of paintings I made after the 2017 elections in Nairobi, where I went to the last major political rally. And in that, which is where, again, I quite like this idea of magical realism and what that brings to the conversation and to the table, because it was almost played out in real life, where the people, the supporters, were dressed in pretty outrageous costumes. Some were dressed fantastically, some were as clowns, some were as superheroes. The way that the politics on stage played out was also quite surreal, where you had a variety of people just professing their love for the leader, who came out dressed in white, the usual Messiah nonsense. But so then when it came to making some work around this, I had really taken quite a lot from looking at the work of Goya, and being quite surprised when I was describing the scene for radio, that I felt like I was actually just describing a Goya etching of these witches sitting in a tree. And then thinking about how Goya also was interested in and looked to sort of superstitions and some of the old Spanish beliefs to critique society, to talk about something about being Spanish in a way, as well as being able to speak universally about that, was interesting to me. And it's something that I then went on looking into this group of paintings. So this is actually also from your neighboring show in your neighboring institute, the Nobel Foundation. And the painting at the back there in the center is the Dumb Oracle, which is in the When We See Us show at the moment. I'll just do another couple quick flicks through, not to take too much time. And that really just, the reason I was also starting off on the foot that I did was that I was interested in hearing from you guys. Through teaching that I've been doing, I've been amazed at the amount of times that there's an expectation for the artist to almost be autobiographical, or it doesn't count. So it's almost like you can only speak for yourself in terms of the narratives that you tell, and how a lot of the students that I've spoken to are battling with this idea, which is a consequence of many of the conversations that have been happening in the world, but that there's almost one has to seek a permission to tell someone else's story. And I suppose part of my issue with that is it really removes the imagination, which for me is the beauty of being involved in culture, painting, literature, music. It's an imagined world. And I thought that poem that you showed, Cassi, was like spot on, and really, to me, that feels like there is a tension there. There is a tension where something speaks to a problem in the world, but it isn't about reportage. It's about addressing and thinking about, reflecting, being transported in a different way through a different pace to what one gets in something that's maybe a bit more literal or professes to be closer to the truth. But nonetheless, the endeavor is still there, to the search for some sort of path into whatever that subject is. And I suppose, I'm beginning to get a bit vague and off course, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on navigating the issue of telling someone else's story, perhaps.
Are you speaking to me, Michael, or are you
to you both, to you all? In fact, also to you, Tandanzani, because making shows at the end of the day, you take someone else's voice and you move it slightly into what you need. So, which, you know.
Yeah, you take curatorial liberty and you take risks, definitely. Well, I'll let Cassi and Edouard take a stab at it.
I even feel you mentioned the word like painting, or the world and culture has leaned so much towards like autobiographical like kind of positions, and I feel like maybe even that is sort of made up in some kind of way, because I think the self as a subject also has some sort of made upness, you know. And I think that's why we have to live long in order to really know oneself and to exude that. So I think that painting or writing any kind of reflection is sort of, I think, even if it's fabulated or whatever the word would be, it's sort of it's imagined in some ways, brings you closer to revealing parts of oneself, which I think is the more interesting path to take. So I definitely feel in my work, I'm imagining, you know, I look at one photograph, but then I've imagined a whole different world, or it becomes abstracted, it becomes loose, it becomes tight, or whatever the feeling evoked is. But then that also reveals some aspect of myself. So I think that's probably the most interesting dance.
Well, what about all the histories that were like swept under the carpet and that have not been told properly, that have been, you know, like, I mean, it takes to us, I mean, there is no, concerning the Haitian Revolution, for example, I mean, I did a survey, and there's probably maybe 200 images done at the time that would be, you know, like a reportage, as you know, like you were saying, and they don't really tell the full story, and they don't really tell the 300 years prior to that event, you know, like in world history of what happened to, you know, like these millions of slaves that, you know, like were transported and how would I say, deported from Africa to the New World. And
Who's
these
they?
are things, excuse me?
Who's they?
I mean, whomever was, you know, like doing I mean, presenting these images, or in what context they were made, and all of these things. I mean, you look at them and then you go to a voodoo ceremony, and then a reenactment is happening right there in front of you of being tossed across, you know, like, I mean, out of board. I mean, where was that image? You know, like, where was that document? You know, like, how was this presented at the time? Because, you know, like, that would have been very interesting to see how, you know, like, of course, the what do you call them, the abolitionists, you know, like, did try to create a series of images concerning those kind of events, but, you know, like, they were not systematic, and you have to really look for them these days. And a lot of them, you know, like, I mean, are searing a kind of, you know, like, things that you think about, you know, because this is part of your story that was never told. And how do you deal with that? And how do you present it? And how do you make sure that people are aware of those kind of discourses and things that have happened, you know, like in over the years? So to me, that's very important, you know, like, that I mean, as artists today, especially, but I mean, I consider myself a Black artist, and this whole history has to be unpacked as well. And I find, you know, like, I mean, I've always thought of myself as, I'm going to do the chronicles of Haiti, and I'm going to fill in the gaps where I feel that, you know, like, the images are not there. Is that being fabulous? You know, like, is that a fabulation of mine? Is that a way of reinterpreting history, or revisiting it? All of these questions, you know, like, are for us to do. And yes, you know, I understand what a friend here is saying, that, you know, like, if it's not lived by one, you know, like, it's not real. I mean, that's, I don't feel that is, you know, like, I don't think artists should be looking at you know, like, I mean, being real or not real. I mean, you're like, everybody has their own agenda. And my agenda is like, okay, let's fill in the gaps, because like these gaps are glaring and not like being told. And it's time for, I mean, for me at least, during my lifetime, I'll try to fill in as many as I can. And also, like one reacts to, like, I mean, the art thing is another thing, I mean, are you true to your art, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, like, what are you supposed to do with it? You understand? I mean, to me, it's a very, very important question. And once I seem to lose that, I mean, I start feeling very queasy and very uneasy about what I'm doing. When I start, like, okay, talking about just myself and my, I mean, what is that? I mean, let's put ourselves in context. I mean, I believe that, one has to, it serves something, it's not just, trying to express ourselves, it's like, it has to express so much more than that. Anyways, that's something you should tell to your students,
Also, like you said, fill in the gaps. I also feel like, what if we can imagine the gaps, right? Like, what if
that's what we do?
Imagine storytelling, and it doesn't. I don't know if it always has to be so historical, because, in Mozambique, so that's the sort of the most coherent way to understand the history of Mozambique is actually through the authorship, and it's mainly magical realism. But these are all made up stories. Nothing is real, but it gives context to the spirit, to the landscape, to the way people interact. And I think that's so that sort of Black magical realism is so much more powerful than the sort of what they teach you in the schools in terms of, it has to be in 1941 this happened or something like that. I don't know. I just feel that Black culture, African culture, is always been an oral tradition, so whether something is actually happened or not, I don't know if that really matters.
Yes, I agree with you.
I just want to say thank you, Michael, for that provocation, because I think it is a topic that needs to, the term fabulation needs to be unpacked, because going back to what you were saying about your students and this question that we're all trying to answer, isn't there a difference between speaking on behalf of, say, your ancestors or your lineage or your context, and speaking on behalf of another people group that you are not attached to? Like, where's the line? Where's the boundary there? And I ask this because, the exhibition that you're all part of, and not to say we have to talk about the exhibition right now, but it's called When We See Us. And so we are, and within that term, we are challenging this idea of who gets to speak for who, in a subtle way, but actually more than that, we're saying it's time that we speak for ourselves and we speak to each other and we speak on our own behalf. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. Is there a difference at all? Should there be a difference? Does it matter?
Well,
yeah, please go for it. Go please, Edouard. Yeah.
Yeah, in Haiti, we have, I mean, there is a saying that we are 215 nations, and 215 very clearly. And I've always wondered, what did that mean? Like that we are like 250 nations. And really what it is that it is inscribed in the, in the memory of all that, like we are not from one particular space in Africa, that we are many, many different nations. And the Haitian religion, the Vodou, is an amalgamation of all of these, like beliefs and all of these memories and all of these cultural appartenances that we have. And it's, I mean, and it becomes, like at one point, like bigger than a continental, like, because it's like centuries of memories and centuries of, and from very different people. And we are very conscious of that. And who are we not to acknowledge all of them at the same time? Like 200 years or 300 years later, that, like these people are formed part of our, like this is the backbone of that nation. It is all of these people, and they have to understand each other. I mean, like probably, like two or three centuries ago, these people would have never met in like in Africa itself. but they did meet, like in a tiny place. So, like probably Haiti is probably the most Pan-African nation in the world, because all of these different ethnic groups, different stories, different memories, like convenes in one particular space. And one has to, all of these stories are retold and told, and, like in religious rites and in stories, it's a very complicated thing. And I cannot not speak to all of them, and they speak to me as well. So what do I do with that when they start speaking to me?
Michael, you had wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think I suppose that there are just two different points. One, the slightly more self-centered, which was that, for myself, when I had a little bit of a crisis before finding, for probably about 6 or 7 years within my work. And I was trying to figure out, the sort of conceptual foundations of my own practice. And part of that for me was really about, if I were to consider an audience, what would that audience be? How would I want to engage in that? And I decided I did want an audience. Yeah. And also that if I were to have one, my first audience would be a Kenyan audience, specifically the thinking of the society and culture I grew up in, and that really shaped me largely. And so then I set out then thinking, like how best would it be to address that audience through what means? And to me, like it seemed like figurative narrative work would be a very direct way of engaging with people. And that's literally how I kind of set out whatever the parameters one gives to oneself to make paintings. That was my parameters. And that's largely guided a lot of what I've done and why I've done it. So the idea of when we see us, is kind of foundational like that to me when thinking of an audience. And then I would say the same would be of the Nairobi Contemporary Arts Institute, which was something called for by the artists I was speaking to here in Nairobi at a time when I wasn't able to spend that much time here, because there just wasn't visibility for the older generation of artists, for artists that weren't represented in a commercial sense, in the small number of commercial galleries that we have here. They didn't have visibility. So again, to provide somewhere that allowed people to do ambitious exhibitions, but also provided a historical context, is super important. And like you said, for better or worse, I think it's really important that the positives, but also all the problems that come with the places that we're in, are part of that conversation. And it's not from a patronizing point of view, but it's out of necessity, because that's the shit that we live in. That's what we have to deal with. Those are our histories, and you cannot rely on somebody else to dissect and reflect upon that, because there isn't the same cultural history. You don't have the same biases. You don't have the same baggage. And, for better or worse, that baggage is also necessary to navigate exactly what is going on. So I'd like that, the kind of, I don't know if you'd call it an ambition of the show to reflect something and say this is about us needing to have a conversation between ourselves, to me is a really important, quite fundamental impulse.
Yeah, thank you both. And even within thinking about when we see us and the different experiences, there's definitely, from a curatorial perspective, we're trying to acknowledge and to highlight the multiplicities of, the African or Black experience as well, that it's not homogeneous, it's complicated. But I want each one of you in different ways have already begun to talk about your contexts or places where that influence you in different ways. So I guess the question is, each one of you in one way or another, have made bodies of work or continue to make bodies of work that reflect your countries of origin. And so I guess the question to each of you is, what is home? What is your relationship to place and space? Especially since each of you have a multiplicity within, you've all lived in multiple places and have really interesting journeys. And I'd love for you guys to unpack that for us.
I want to hear about Cassie. How did she end up in Haiti?
Well, and I lived in both your countries. So for me, of course, regionalism has some sort of inspiration in anyone's thinking or being, but I really strive for a universal approach. And with, Michael speaking about Goya, Goya's been a big influence on me. And, I really, with my work, I look at the canon of art history and painting, and that to me is so exciting. I feel at home in the Prado Museum, and I also feel at home walking the streets of Maputo. So for me, I think that's the most exciting and sort of liberating human experience, is that there really isn't any borders. And I grew up in the kind of school of the peripatetic kind of thinking, and being able to move and finding out so many similarities in the diaspora, having lived in Benin and then also living in Haiti and living in Uganda. The ideas are, and that's why even on my desk I have John Mbiti, because I'm so inspired by John Mbiti, because his ideas around kind of the Christian theologies and African spirituality. I've seen so much of this in my lifetime, being, quite young and ending up in Haiti. And I left Kenya to go to Haiti because of a magical, real instance that happened to my family. And so we left to Haiti. We were living in Embu at the time. But I remember these stories, and then I remember ending up in Haiti, and I remember the magical real. As a child, you don't, you're sort of feeling all the sensations, and then obviously intellect grows, and then you're able to understand maybe some of the thinking, and then if you're lucky enough, maybe you become an artist or a writer or something, and then you're able to expand further. So to answer your question, for me, it's less about, because I was born in Maputo and lived there later in my life, but I even though I use Lusophone Africa as kind of a sort of a platform, I wouldn't say that all the sensory comes from that region. For me, it's more finding shared sensories in these places, and then maybe hoping that the audience can also feel connected or recognize or something like this. And I think that's more exciting, because those were revelations brought to me.
For me, it's been well, for me, it's been looking at the Americas, from from the standpoint of, in Haiti as well as its position within that context. We were literally, I consider the whole of the Americas, as this huge, exploitation kind of organization of the economics, and for the benefit of Europe, et cetera, et cetera. But when you start visiting and you start looking at the interactions within the Americas, it is quite fascinating to see the differences and the similarities between the different approaches of this colonial story. And to me, that has been very important, to really unpack that and try to understand it from, from a historical point of view, economical point of view, and seeing what was being exploited, who was being exploited, And in all of these stories, like become, like quite fascinating. And also returning back to, like back to Africa. My first encounter with Africa was an invitation that was, like as surreal as it was really. I was invited to participate in the first International Voodoo Cultures Festival in Benin. And that was, like unbelievable, because it was my first real visit to I had been to Senegal prior to that, and it was very organized. Meanwhile, in this one, nobody knew what they were doing. And because, the Benin was a very peculiar place, which had been for 30, 40 years, like as a puppet state of China in the middle of Africa. And suddenly, and they literally had almost wiped out, like any semblance of African religiosity there, which is, basically the seat of voodoo. And they were trying to reconnect with that because of X, Y, and Z. But, like at the moment I got there, it was, like nobody, there was one figure that represented the whole thing, which was this voodoo pope. His name was Dagbo Hunan, and he was literally the repository of, like whatever was left of this voodoo religion in that context. And being there, I realized that, like this, religion is very important to most, and it is essential to, because that's where really the psyche of people, like really gets, like to be part. It's not, like just knowledge of your history, just knowledge of, somehow it impacts, like the way one views oneself, and it impacts also the histories that are behind all of us. And somehow you have to really look at it very carefully, and to understand like your position in life. Where you've been, who were your path, what was your path, and really, I got there to Cotonou, and I felt like I had landed in Port-au-Prince, because everything around me sounded like at home, because even the intonation, they didn't speak at all either Creole or French. They did speak French, but like their language is. But it was to me as if I was listening for some conversation that were, like very similar to, like to the ones I heard at home. And it just, I just felt immediately at ease and at home, and understood, like what was going on, and I could infer, like what was happening. The only thing that was unpleasant is to be looked upon as the uncle from America, which I was not at all, and that really got me a bit annoyed. I would remind them, like that I was sold in the process, like, and I even had to ask the king of Arada, like if it was usual for him to because they had a big statue of Toussaint Louverture, like in front of his palace, et cetera, and he was talking. So I had to remind him, that I asked him, like, do you sell your princes, like to slavery? And his answer was even more crazy than my question. He answered, "Oh, we thought he was going on vacation." You didn't go on vacation to the Caribbean, like in the 17th century. You just did not, like the concept did not even exist, So, I've just realized that the conversation had gone haywire, and I stopped it right there. I said, listen, we'll talk about
fabulation.
Exactly.
That was a different type of fabulation.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Michael, over to you in terms of, what is home and what is your relationship to place and space?
Well, I don't really know how to answer what is home. I think like home for me has changed because I've recently had a daughter, and it's just messed with everything. Everything that I thought was a certain way is no longer that way. So I can't really answer that. And in a sense, I would have to speak through my work, really, which would be to say that it's the things like where something happens and it feels like it has an impact that's enough to make me want to make work about it. And for that, there's a whole bunch of other connections that, for me personally, I usually have to a place before making that work. I would find it very difficult to, well, I do find it very difficult to make something thinking about a subject that I don't have a stake in it personally in some way. And again, not that it's autobiographical, but just that I feel some kind of, cultural like engagement, whether it's socio-political, cultural, emotional, there's something in there that makes me want to keep coming back. And I can't really define that. It changes. For the longest time, the kind of center of that would have been Kenya, but I also live in Indonesia now, and my daughter is half Indonesian, so you know that I feel is home. And I feel a very deep stake in that, as it's as much like her half is there. But also, you know, I've spent a long time in the UK, you know, and it's definitely left a very big imprint in me. So I can't, like, I find it very difficult to answer that. Yeah.
I lived in Indonesia. Are you in Yogyakarta? Or were you?
No, I'm in Bali.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. You live everywhere.
Everywhere.
I was younger, but yeah, no. And from Indonesia, I moved to Kenya. But no, there's also so much connection, I think, between the two, you know?
Yeah, it's surreal. It's kind of, it's
surreal.
been one of the surreal things about being there. It's yeah.
Sure, it feels very natural.
The Indian Ocean. There's
exactly.
something going on around
there. Essence.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess this kind of prompts me to ask you guys about artistic lineages. So you know, the one of the many reasons we decided to create the When We See Us exhibition was to remind people that a lot of the painting coming out today from young artists is part of a big, rich, complex historical continuum. And we actually, what underpins this is this tracing of all these artistic lineages from the continent and the African diaspora. And this is particularly for Michael and Edouard. You're both, in one way or another, doing work that helps to trace or document or unearth or fill gaps where artistic lineages are not, or lineages in general, are not very visible. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Michael, I guess talking about some of your, you know, you literally helped us with, we have a timeline in the When We See Us exhibition. It starts with 1804, the Haitian Revolution, to present day. And Michael, you were really instrumental in our research in East Africa because you had done an East African timeline. And then Edouard, I'd love for you to also speak about some of the work you've done as a curator and just, you know, the anecdote you were sharing earlier about being surrounded by the Haiti cultural space and the work you've done in France.
Are you starting, Michael?
Go for it. You start. I'll follow.
Well, mine is it's very complex. Indeed, yes. I mean, I was very touched, you know, like to see that, you know, like your timeline starts with the Haitian Revolution, and indeed, it's been. I mean, it's all about sugar, and sugar was the prime. I mean, commodity, you know, like being worked on, you know, I mean, being produced, and France really got a hold of it at the beginning, and all of the golden age, French golden age, is based on the sugar, and all the words used for the process of refinement of sugar is used also in the refinement of not only customs and also taste and everything concerning, you know, like French development, and it's very interesting when you look at it. You know, I mean, all the terms used in the arts in France, you know, like are the same words used for refinement of sugar, refinement of taste, refinement of everything. So I mean, it's always been very important to me to realize, you know, like, I mean, like disruptions in production system, et cetera, you know, like do produce I mean, different types of art. And I've been always looking at that. And living in Miami, I felt, okay, what, I mean, yes, I'm interested in histories. I'm interested, what does this city, you know, like represent where I'm living right now? And how can I make use of, you know, like, I mean, from that standpoint, how do I present, you know, like myself or my colleagues? Because I mean, though we are, I mean, the Caribbean is a very complex place. I mean, and it's not as complex as these African, you know, like millenary stories as we can really start with, you know, like discovery. I mean, it's only 500 years. So, you know, like it's circumscribed to a certain time frame. And Haiti represents quite a very early breakdown of the European way of organizing things. And for many years, you know, like it was thought that Haiti did not have a visual culture or, I mean, that was of any importance. And it suddenly appeared in the 40s and 50s, and it became a total sensation worldwide. I mean, I've always had a problem with that particular vision of things, and it starts with photography when we, you know, like when people went to Haiti in the same way that they went to Africa, you know, like to start documenting and start looking at it in certain ways. There were, of course, you know, like, I mean, in the 1800s, I mean, documentations on the revolution itself, et cetera. But, you know, like to start looking at if there is a production of culture, you know, like in Haiti, started with visitors, you know, like in the late 1900s to, you know, like the 20s, and you realize that what they were capturing is, you know, like a visual. I mean, they were not looking at for cultural production, but they saw it. You can see it in the earliest of the photographs, and I mean, they would infer what happened in the 40s and 50s when, you know, like artists. I mean, when there was one center that opened in Port-au-Prince, and the Centre d'Art, and it was a very democratic idea, and everybody that was interested in the arts just, you know, like geared themselves toward that particular space. And what happened was an efflorescence of production in the 40s and 50s. And I've just curated a show for a collection that was donated, and it probably will be maybe the second or third, a collection of Haitian art to be in permanent exhibit in a museum elsewhere than Haiti. And it was very important for me to really state that, and also to present something that was, you know, like reminiscent. And when you look at it, yes, there's been a lot said about Haiti and a lot said about its place in the arts recently, and et cetera, but what was present was always there. I mean, there was, you know, like, I mean, since the beginning, you know, like, I mean, you can see it on the walls of photographs of voodoo temples taken by, you know, like foreigners visiting the island. So, I mean, it was always there, but it really had its moment, you know, like in the 40s and 50s with this opening of a very democratic kind of a space where, you know, like everybody was welcome. And unfortunately for the ones that usually had the mainmise, the hold on culture, I mean, they were not the ones to be, you know, like to be lauded and applauded, you know, like internationally. And I mean, I want to tell that story, and I did say it, and I reviewed it. I mean, looked at it carefully. It was, I mean, first of all, Haiti always had a culture, and second of all, I mean, you know, like Africans did not come devoid of everything when they became slaves. I mean, they brought their whole cultures with them, and these are cultures that are millenary. And now, even now, in a crux that's so small like Haiti, all these different, like cultures, like getting involved with each other and presenting something probably very different and probably very new, let's say, concerning, like visual cultures. I mean, that's one thing. Now, the second, I'm interested in everything, and like trying to put everything in context, which is what I try to do every time. It's sometimes very complicated, very ambitious. Sometimes I do say what I want to say, but sometimes, like, I mean, I'm left, but like there's a lot of I mean, questions, like, let's say in my, either in my research, either in my, like way of presenting. It's always a complicated kind of thing. I mean, like me, I'm determined to, now I think the new world, i.e. the Americas, like not the Americas as everybody thinks the United States is, have a, we can start a new history of the world from the, like from the 1500s on. I mean, let's start looking at what happened from our point of view. I mean, people don't even understand what I'm trying to say, but I think we've had, like 500 years of very, very prolific cultural production. And I think we can start looking at the world from the Americas point of view. I mean, we've been deported here in many, many ways. I mean, we should start really looking at the rest of the planet, like from our standpoint of view, as, like contrary to what has been happening for like millenaries, everything from a standpoint of either, like Europe or elsewhere, you understand? So that's something that I'm working on. I don't think anybody will follow me in that one, but I mean, I do believe that that we could start doing that if we wanted to. What about you?
I think that really is, sorry, before we go to Michael, I think that's super interesting. And I know people will definitely follow you. And I want to come back to some of what you said about, like Centre d'Art. We have 3 Urbans in the When We See Us exhibition. And I know Philome was a part or affiliated, with Centre d'Art. So I would love to come back to that at some point. But it's also a question of what do we do with, and I don't have the answer, but what do we do with, the white savior or missionary who does start something and that you can utilize? And maybe that leads us to Makerere, Michael.
Exactly.
Makerere University, which was started by Margaret Trowell, and a lot of the artists that came out of Makerere were part of the research that you've done in the past.
Yeah, I think you can't look at the history of contemporary art in East Africa without colonial figures or settler figures who've come and played a part. Like, you can't, and I don't see why you'd want to. I don't see why someone's history precludes them from also having a point in which they contributed positively to a narrative. And I feel like it's absurd to want to make history fit into a particular shape. But of course, everyone comes with their blank spaces, and even if they weren't there would be other issues and so on. But for us, in particular, it's kind of like a small cousin, tiny cousin of your When We See Us show, where we wanted to look at figurative painting over a 50-year period through the eyes of 10 artists and just see the stylistic changes, starting with the Makerere University school, in particular Ntiro, who was this amazing Tanzanian painter, also was a diplomat, first African professor of art at Makerere and in the region subsequently. So we started with a painting of his, and then through his students, many of whom moved to Nairobi as they could get more commercial success with their work. Things changed and different styles changed. So at Nkai, we tried to tell this, articulate a little bit of this story, because as you said, because we haven't had in place art writing that was forensic enough to look into the histories and the intentions of the artists, often you get a very dumbed down version of what was actually going on. There was a movement in the 80s in Nairobi by a group called the Ngecha artists, and that was really set up against the university educated artists that came before, and subsequently they took away what would be otherwise seen as a sophisticated language and started painting with something much more gestural and crude and direct, in a sense. And that was very intentional. But when this came to be written about, it was basically like these guys had crawled out the bush, you know, with a brush in their hand and started making this stuff. And that's really defined the narrative for the next 20 years. And nobody had written, or maybe a couple of people had written in books. Like there was an amazing exhibition called 7 Stories at the Whitechapel in the 90s, where that text is fantastic on the effect of some of the workshops and so on, but writing about the intentionality of the artist and taking that seriously, that these were, you know, self-determined stylistic changes and movements, and there was a thinking through the mark-making history as well. Those are things that were never taken seriously. So we really wanted to try and show that evolution and context. And that really also, one of the quite sad things about our current state of the art world in Nairobi is we don't have a functioning contemporary art museum. So you can't actually go anywhere and see stuff before 2000 that was made before 2005. And I remember like walking around our first exhibition, which was a solo show by the artist Sain Wadu called I Hope So, and hearing some guys, younger artists, saying, "Oh my God, that was made in 1984. That's before we were born. You know, can you believe it?" And I was just like, you know, that should not be the case. You should not be able to say that. You should be able to have your own history in a place that you can see it, learn about it, reflect upon it, and evolve and change and react or use or go against, whatever you want to do with it. But you should be able to have somewhere that you have that. And so then publications become super important as well, so that there's something that outlives, publications and collections, something that outlives that. So you do have a place in which people can learn about stuff, but also artists can go to see what their own foundations are, because we all have them, even if they're not recorded. It's there. So that's one of the sort of ambitions of the Nairobi Contemporary Arts Institute through its collections and the exhibitions, is partly trying to fill in the gaps. And there have been extraordinary institutions before us, like Makerere, like Payapa, you know, who've played a part, but sadly, through either mismanagement, lack of funds, these institutions have suffered, and there's nowhere to go now. And the work that they've had in collections is rotting. It's being eaten by termites. They don't have roofs over the collections, so they're watered, they're destroyed, they're warped. You know, like the state of those things is really not great. And that's where there's another kind of level of pressure for anyone who is doing something now to make sure what is there is well documented and preserved in a way that others will be able to see it further down the line.
That's amazing, and I think the work that you and your team are doing at INCAI is phenomenal and incredible. So thank you for that. And I guess this leads me to another important question about, you know, so we've all in one way or another said that there are gaps or there are challenges, or I guess in a broader sense, part of fabulation is part of the role of fabulation is to help fill those gaps in one way or another. And so I guess my question to all three of you is, what is art education? Because art education, whatever that is for you, is one solution towards filling those gaps or underrepresented history. So what is art education to you?
That's a
Maybe
big-
the teacher should speak.
Well, I'm not a teacher. I just like to dabble. But you're the teacher,
Michael.
Michael.
I'm liking these screens where you can point and it's
Yeah.
it's everyone.
By the way, I wanted to say that I used to visit MOCAA University and I would go visit the artist studios, and that's really what made me want to be a painter.
Get out of here. That's amazing.
So
How was it at that time? What was the state of it?
it was better. I didn't see any termite. It was nothing like Mozambique where, the collections are collecting dust, and I mean, I wouldn't say termites, but okay, it was raw. It was definitely raw. Let's say that. But still very inspiring, but I definitely think things have probably gone towards a more dilapidated sense, just hearing you speak. And I wanted to add to what Michael was saying earlier, that there aren't any. I think that's a really big problem on the continent in general, and South Africa does a better job, and so does Morocco, with keeping contemporary collections, but definitely in Mozambique that doesn't exist. And it's like when you go to the government private owned museum, it's like you've walked into a time capsule, which is pretty incredible in itself, but it there's nothing that gives way to lending new ideas and new styles, and I think that's very important. And I just wanted to add a little history into the Mozambican sort of art canon. It became, so artists used to be able to sort of explore and trade in the market via European dealers. And then when the Portuguese fell out of power and Samora Machel came into presidency, he decided that being an artist is a capitalist endeavor, and that it doesn't go towards the sort of pan-social ideology, and so then artists became cooperatives. So if you go to Maputo City, there's a cooperative called Núcleo de Arte, and for that sense, that to be an artist is really coined as something like bohemian. You don't make money. It's not for the people. It's and so I think now, to touch on what you were saying, Tandazani, about what is art education, I'm not a teacher by any means, but I think it's by doing. And then artists of my generation will see that it is possible, and it's not just speaking to Mozambicans, that it's not like some bohemian endeavor, and that there's nothing that they can do to make radical change or whatever change that they're hoping to make.
Just to jump in there before everyone else answers, you say you're not a teacher. But the reason I asked this question is because in one way or another, each of you are influencing a whole bunch of people just through your practice. Cassi, I read something about you over the weekend where you at your exhibitions, like you will invite, the hairdresser, you'll be sitting at a cafe, and then the whole cafe comes to your exhibition opening. And there's a quote where you say, sorry if I paraphrase, but there was somewhere where you said something like, I think someone a Zimbabwean at a cafe came eventually to your exhibition, and they were blown away because they said, I didn't know Black people could do this. So you literally transformed how she saw art and how she saw other Black people. So for me, that's a teacher, So I don't know. I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, totally. And and that's what I guess I meant by doing. And there was this circumstance in South Africa, and then when I was in Miami showing in Little Haiti, that felt very important to me. And so I invited the woman who did my hair and her daughter, and I think that essentially, Black consciousness is very much a a creative consciousness, and so I think it's really empowering when communities like that can have access, in ways that maybe they can see themselves in these positions. So I think the gallery can really be a scary place, if you don't know that you can be invited as someone who knows nothing. Even some people don't even know that they can go to museums. So I sit them down, I'll sit the postman down and say, no, you can go to this museum, you can go and see this Haitian folklore, exhibition, or you can go see When We See Us, those are really profound moments, I think, for me.
Well, there is also, like in the case of Haiti, there's been after the earthquake, there was a real, I felt that it was, what happened there. And it was quite a moment, because it seemed like a whole world had disappeared. The museum was destroyed. A lot of the works, were recuperated, were salvaged, but a lot of them were lost. And I decided that I knew that for Haiti, a lot of people had been interested in it. And there were lots of collectors and collections, in the States and elsewhere. So I've decided, and I pushed, for a few young scholars, to look into this, and they have managed to garner some serious monies, and they are doing an inventory of all Haitian artworks elsewhere than Haiti, so that we know and that we can document it, and also create, encyclopedias and whatever, really documents of great importance, because what I knew was going to happen happened. The focus of Haitian art just shifted completely, because of this loss of whatever was established for the past 40 years. It disappeared, and now we have a completely new expression, because Haitians, that's something I'm going to have to prove at one point, is that we have it in us, that we want to do it. But I think everybody does it, wants to, express themselves and present, their best foot forward, vis-a-vis their what they feel a culture is. And we've done so. We've done we're doing this inventory, but in the process, we still have to continue documenting what's happening on the field right now. And it's been like it's like a total shift. I organized an exhibit with a friend of mine in New York, and it's called Port-au-Prince. It was supposed to be what was it? What did we call it? The psychogeography of Port-au-Prince, i.e. points of, of production in one city. That's what we intended to do, but we finally realized that the shift was so dramatic that we had to present what was, really happening, with these groups of young artists, like me. So we did this exhibit, and it's called Port-au-Prince, and you have to see it to believe it. What Haiti was prior to that earthquake and what it is right now is like two completely different worlds. Now, the art, before it was probably a result of dictatorships and stuff like that people could not really express themselves properly. Now there's no real government, so people do whatever they want. Hence the no regulations, no a prioris. So the artists are, really talking about, subjects that are very tough, such as death, such as, a lack of organization, a lack of civil society. It's like really a collapse of everything that, is considered as a society. And in that particular, it was very tough to swallow, to see that these kids are really, rather than use paint and everything, are rather, go to pillage, you know, like cemeteries to start doing sculptures, you know, like picking up, you know, like bones and to the point that I was explaining how wonderful it was. I said, you know, I got a restaurant somewhere in Port-au-Prince. Somebody turned around and said, Edouard, this could be your grandmother that's in that sculpture, you know. So I just like, oh my God, it might be true. You know, it might be grandma bones, you know, like that they've deterred or whatever, you know, like to put in the skull. Anyways, yes, it's education is important. I mean, they should know what they have as a legacy. I mean, not that it's the only one that they should have. And I mean, I applaud, you know, like that, the fact that, you know, in a place like Haiti, that things are still happening. Now I'm very interested also in the diaspora, because, you know, like, I mean, what has been happening here in Miami and elsewhere in the United States is, you know, like, I mean, all of these immigrants that came in the last 20 years, I mean, you know, like they've grown up and they are, you know, like, what are they? Are they Haitian? Are they Haitian American? How do they define themselves? And also, you know, how, I mean, I know that the city, for example, in Miami, the educational system has been very, very apprised. I mean, they've known that these currents of individuals were coming, and that that was part of their legacy, and that they should really look at them as such. And really, a lot of I mean, there are names now of these young artists that are literally being formed here in Miami, for example, in New York and in Montreal, that have garnered some impetus, you know. I mean, I think we're all, the three of us, part of, you know, like the initial core group of probably the ones like that have left their homeland and continue circulating and looking at what's happening home, if we can call it again that, you know. But we are very interested. I mean, I can see all from what has been said that that we are all, I mean, we are part of the diaspora as well. I mean, I'm not totally out of Haiti, but I mean, I've been out of Haiti since probably I was 9 years old. Like, I went back and forth. So, I mean, yes, I'm very interested in Haiti, but I also might have another attitude towards Haitian art that, you know, like I might not be having if I had been consistently living there. You know? So that's what I'm interested in, and I'll be presenting an exhibit next year. I'm doing the research right now and trying to garner, you know, like the information concerning these artists and their curses. Who did they go to school with? How were they accepted here in the USA? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, we'll always have something to study, huh?
Always. Thank you for that, Edouard. Michael?
Yeah, education. Well, I suppose they're different types, but I found art school good for a sort of conceptual education and having time with other artists that are at a similar stage of what the fuck is going on in their lives, and having those conversations and trying to figure stuff out. You know, in my own like art school, I was in the UK in London for both my postgrad and BA, and really, you know, the core group of friends that I had were the majority of what I would say was my education. And then the other type of education, which also is constant, is just looking at, for me, looking at what other people make, and thinking about it. I'm a very, very slow reader, so that sadly I don't read enough, but thank God for audiobooks. You know, that's another part of things. And you know, but I think the one thing about education is that there is something outside of yourself that's available, and just making sure that there is something that people can get to, because a lot of people also don't have access to that type of conversation. They don't have access to the work. They don't have access in that sense. And I would say education is really then, or the responsibility for those that do have access is to try and allow that to be as far as possible. You know, whether that's through the the hairdresser or through looking at the other artist's work and so on. Like, I don't know, there's so many different ways of that happening.
Thank you all for that. I just want to ask you for concluding remarks, but maybe to kind of prompt you or to contextualize what you might say. I just want to remind you of some of the things that you said during the session in the last hour and a half. Edward, you said history has to be rewritten, reinterpreted. And you also said, which I found so fascinating, you said Haiti is the most Pan-African space in the world. Cassi, you spoke a lot about painting of experiences, painting of human experiences when you were unpacking what fabulation meant for you. And Michael, you provoked us by asking about this idea of permission to speak for yourself and for others. We also spoke about memory archives. I mean, we didn't have enough time to go into all of these things. Place and the spirituality, whether it's through John Beatty's book or voodooism or what have you, or the missionary-led initiative kept coming up in the conversation. So with that said, I just want to ask you each if you have any concluding remarks or provocations.
I guess in conclusion, I think in context to our dialogue today about fabulation and figuration, I think ultimately for me, the realm of fabulation is essentially the human experience, which is a dualistic experience that is constantly, in attaining and, pleasure and avoiding pain. And I think that what makes life so rich and interesting, and exploring that through painting and creating these, narratives have been such a rich experience for me. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Cassi.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say in terms of closing remarks, except my battery is at 2% and dying.
Okay.
The power has gone. Sorry, I didn't realize that the power has gone on parts. So except for the lights
cool.
that we have, my laptop's going. If I cut off, that's all. But yeah, it's amazing to be part of the exhibition. I wish I had been able to see it, but it's just super exciting as well for me to see shows like this coming from the continent and starting there. And it's also a beautiful thing to see that it's able to travel outside of the continent as well. Because I think, as you said, those conversations that are happening within the continent, it's great that gets visibility beyond, and a different way of approaching and talking and thinking about all of these things is experienced. And what a privilege to be able to be part of that, and be part of this conversation as well. And yeah, I'm really bad at closing remarks, but
no, that's beautiful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. Edward?
Me, it's first of all, it's amazing that this is happening in Africa, and I've always felt personally that what did matter, you understand, to have reconnaissance, to be recognized, I feel that this being in an exhibit in South Africa, in Africa itself, is an accomplishment. And I think that that this was organized by somewhere in Africa, to look at its own diaspora and recognizing it and inviting it. I mean, is the most, to me, I don't think I could have a more, how would I say, I feel good about it, and I feel really, really proud of it as well. So thank you. You know, it's very touching.
Thank you. Well, thank you to all of you, and thank you for taking time to be part of this webinar series. There is one question that came in just as I asked for concluding remarks. Anyone can feel free to answer it. It's someone asking, what advice do you have for a young artist who has also no answer to what is home, but is developing a point of view in their work that fits in everywhere and nowhere? Where does identity start and end? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
Seek universality.
Yes.
Yeah. What did you say, Cassie?
I said seek universality.
That's great.
And by delving, but look for universality as an end product. You know, you can go very deeply into what you feel and what you want to do, but make sure that the end product is universal.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, guys. Michael, you look like you have something to say, but no pressure.
Anecdote. I remember speaking to actually an older South African artist and about something similar, and he was saying that, you know, it's funny, the more specific you are about something, the more universal it gets.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you all for that, and thank you all for responding to that question. Yeah, thank you so much for such an engaging conversation. I always feel like we run out of time with these sessions. So thank you so much. And for our audiences, thank you so much for tuning in. When we see us, a century of painting, sorry, I don't know why I've just gone blank on an exhibition I co-curated. When we see us, a Century of Black Figuration and Painting is up until the 3rd of September. So if you can, please come down to Cape Town Zeitz MOCAA to see it. The webinars will continue until October. And the next webinar will be on Tuesday, 29 August. The topic for that August webinar will be complexities, contradiction, and contestation around race in Africa. So that's Tuesday, 29 August, same place, same time. And to see recordings of all the other webinars we've had, please follow us on our social media channels and look out on our YouTube channel to view those. So thank you so much and good night, everyone.